Right, I think we're live. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. As always, please let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. And welcome to the Gaming Rules monthly live Q&A for, what month are we in? June. Almost at the end of June. Another month gone. Halfway through the year already. As always, I'm going to be answering questions that I've received in advance first. And then I'll be going to the live chat. So if you are sticking around for the next hour and a half and you can't make it, if you're sticking around for the next hour and a half and you can wait until the live and Q&A part of the show, then great. If not, feel free to put your questions in the chat now, but please put the word question in caps at the start. Vicky will see those and she will transfer those questions into the live doc. Unfortunately, the chat plugin has chosen green for everybody's names, so I can barely see people's names on the background. Let me just fix that and see if it works. I can go into the chat plugin and I can do this and I can do that and I can do that and it will reset it, and let's see what random color it picks this time. I don't have an option. There is only one chat plugin available for Streamlabs, and it does pick a random color and you can't define the color. So there you go. We now have a nice orangey red. So that's good. That's good. Right. Okay. So as mentioned, we're going to start with some of the questions that I've been asked in advance. So I've put these in a couple of places. My Board Game Geek Guild is the best place to get information. If you are not a member of my Board Game Geek Guild, please join up. There's various bits on there, various bits of information, some notifications. Vicky's going to put a link in the chat now. And if you can, go to the guild, please join, and please click the subscribe button, because otherwise you won't see anything that goes on there. Right, over to the first question that we've had in advance, and this is from Patrick McArdle. Thank you very much, Patrick. This was asked on my BGG Guild, and he's talking about the fact that Stonemaier Games have recently put out a rules change for Red Rising. Now, Red Rising is their latest game, I think. I've not had a chance to try it yet. And apparently there is, so I've not played it, but apparently there is a take that element of the game, which he thought improved the overall player experience. And he's looking into how this wasn't thought of or picked up as an issue in the development of the game or in playtesting. Now, that's a whole other topic, playtesting, development, that I can talk about for like half an hour, because I'm involved in that side of the industry a bit as well. But that's not what this question is. This question is about, are there any other examples that I can think of where a popular game has had a fairly big rules alteration so soon after release? And I asked my Patreon supporters on the Slack channel this afternoon for some help with this. And the first one that I can think of, and this is a rules change that didn't come out soon after the game was released, but Axes and Allies. So Axes and Allies, which I played when I was growing up, it's one of the games which I played a lot when I was growing up. And it's one of the ones that got me into gaming. There was a rule in the original version of Axes and Allies where you can do tech development, and if you were lucky and you managed to roll a 6 and get heavy bombers as the allies, you pretty much won the game. It was just a bit too much. So many people house ruled it and changed it, and I think they officially did change the rules on heavy bombers as well, so that they became 2 dice instead of 3, because it was just way too strong. Another one, and I don't know how popular this game is, but Martin Wallace's A Few Acres of Snow, the infamous Halifax Hammers strategy. So A Few Acres of Snow, great concept for a game, and if it wasn't broken, great game. Really great game. However, there was a strategy which was completely broken, and in order to fix it, Martin had to basically redesign some fundamental parts of the game and change the way things worked. And then unfortunately it got broken again. So slightly disappointing, but that is another game that came out. The other thing to mention here is, I mean, we're not talking about games that have some tweaks to the errata and the cards, because that happens all the time. But if we look at a game like Scythe, just going back to Stonemaier Games again, certain combos of faction and special power has now been banned because it's too strong. If we look at Tapestry, another game from Stonemaier Games, fairly soon after that came out, there was some rebalance changes for the civilizations. So yeah. Now, you could also talk about Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition, which I played loads. Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition, the fighter strategy was just way too powerful. Now, they fixed that not by an official rules change, but they fixed that by an expansion set which nerfed the effective fighters. So there's various ways that you can fix a game once it's come out. But anyway, yeah, it's an interesting conversation. As I say, at some point in future, I'm more than happy to talk about the role of developers, playtesters, and everything else, because I have seen good playtesting and development, and I've also seen very bad playtesting and development. It is an art into itself, and if you don't do it right, you end up with games coming out that are just not tested properly, basically. Right, moving on. Monica's got some questions. Have I ever feared that I would grow tired of a particular game? I don't think I have. I mean, if we look at some of my favourite games, those favourite games, generally speaking, are still my favourite games through the ages, Mage Knight, things like that. There are certain games which were my favourites 20, 25 years ago, like Civilization, Axis and Allies and things like that, which I don't play anymore, but that's mainly down to the fact that they are just too long for what they are. But no, I don't ever fear that I grow tired of a particular game. Next question is actually a good one. Do I think what would happen to my collection if I suddenly got bored with playing games? And the answer is no. I don't think about that because I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think this has been ingrained into me now my entire life, and I can't see that ever changing. So yeah, right. Neil says, oh, and this is some spoiler information here. If you don't want to know what the next Too Many Bones expansion says, switch off now, because in my last Q&A, I did announce that the next Too Many Bones expansion is based on the Wombles. If you don't know what the Wombles is, Google it. It's a British TV show from the 70s. So Neil is saying, what other games do I think would work well with a Wombles re-theme? And that is a question for the chat, because, I don't know, I mean, Neil has suggested Gloomhaven, because if you have a Wombles theme to Gloomhaven, it makes the cleanup a lot easier. I see what you did there, Neil, very clever. But yeah, question for the live chat. What game do you think would be better if it had a Wombles re-theme? Feel free, start putting your answers in the chat. Next question is from Kenneth. During the Mandala Stones stream, so recently I have done a playthrough of Mandala Stones. If you're interested, go and check it out. It's from last week on the channel. But I mentioned in that stream that one of my pet peeves with games is where players are forced at the start of the game, you get 2 objective cards and you've got to pick one. Now, it's the same with Gloomhaven and the battle goals. It's the same with Castles of Mad King Ludwig. There's loads of games. Loads of games use this mechanism where, start of the game, here's 2 end game scoring cards, choose one of them to keep, and that is your end game scoring. Personally, that's not something I like in games. What I like is, here's 2 end game scoring cards, or here's 2 objective cards, or whatever. You can only ever do one of these during the game, and as soon as you've done one of them, you get rid of the other one. But you don't have to decide. Because making that decision at the start of the game, blindly, without the game developing or not, it's just one of my pet peeves. So Kenneth is asking, do I have any other design pet peeves, rules that keep appearing in games that I think need a slight tweak or variant? Nothing that I see, I mean, that's probably the main one. I don't think there's anything that I see a lot of everywhere. I am a big fan of making decisions based on a lot of information, or based on more information than sometimes the game gives you. So for example, in Power Grid, I prefer to play with the top card of the deck visible. So it's not in the game, but you see what's coming next. Now, I'm not saying that's a design flaw, that's just a personal preference that I have. Oh, that's a very good suggestion, Graham. So Graham's suggestion, terraforming Wimbledon. Perfect. Since the Wombles are the Wombles of Wimbledon. Right, Mark is asking, did the Dragon Pass game happen on Sunday or was it Patreons only? Yes and yes. So this weekend just gone, some of you may know I advertised that I was running a virtual convention and I was playing games all weekend. And I was going to be doing lots of live streams, and then unfortunately I got quite ill. So I did still do some live streams. I still did do a 5.5 hour game of Too Many Bones on Saturday. But the other streams that I had planned for Saturday, I wasn't able to do. And on Sunday morning, I wasn't really in a fit state for doing a public stream, but I also didn't want to miss out on playing Dragon Pass. Dragon Pass is a game from 1980, and me and Peter Rushton played the game on Sunday morning, but I wasn't up to that being a public stream. So that was a Patreon only stream. So I did play it. Tick that off the bucket list, and I'm currently deciding whether I want to play it again, because I don't want to play it again with the current combat rules, but I don't know if tweaking the combat rules would actually break the game. I don't think they would. So I'm keen to try it again, but with average dice. Mark is asking, and this is a very good question because I can answer this one without much much decisions. Which board game would I most like to see a digital implementation of? And which video game would I most likely to see a board game implementation of? So, first of all, a board game that I would like to see a digital implementation of is Mage Knight, because it's one of my favourite games. Through the Ages has had a digital implementation. Gloomhaven's had a digital implementation. Mage Knight needs a digital implementation. Apparently Direwolf Digital are working on it, but they've been working on it for a few years and it's gone a bit quiet. So hopefully, but yeah, Mage Knight as a digital version, I might as well give it work now. In terms of a video game that I would most likely to see a board game implementation of, and it's one that I've actually had ideas of turning into a physical board game myself, and that's Factorio. Factorio is an amazing game, and I really, really love it. And if there was a board game version of Factorio, somehow, that would be fantastic. My other answer to Factorio is Frostpunk, but Frostpunk is becoming a board game. Frostpunk is an amazing digital computer game. I love it. I think it's fantastic, and that is getting a board game. So yeah, Factorio is the next one. Right, now Brian has asked a question, which I'm not going to be able to answer this, Brian. If McVitie's approached me to make Jaffa Cake the board game, what type of game do I think it would be? Which parts of the sourcing, manufacturing, marketing, distribution, and innovation processes would I include? Which mechanisms would I include to model the various game subsystems? These are very good questions. And would the game also include a solo mode, and how would you see this working? I don't know. You're asking me to design a game. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you were going to design a Jaffa Cake themed board game, would you have... I mean, yeah, you could have innovation. So you could have, like, each player is running a Jaffa Cake studio, and you've got to innovate to design new ones. Then you've got to procure all of the materials. Then you've got to run them in the factory and all of that sort of stuff. And then you've got to sell them. And it's the one who manages to make the most money that wins. As for the mechanisms, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what mechanisms it would include. Probably worker placement, because I like worker placement games. What do we think of the Aldi rip-off Tunnocks caramel wafers? They were fine. Now, bearing in mind, we haven't had actual Tunnocks caramel wafers for a long time. So we might need to do a test. We might need to buy proper ones. Maybe I'll do that as a Patreon-only video one day. That's what I'm going to do, right? I don't know when, but it's my birthday this weekend. I might do it for my birthday. But what I'm going to do, and this will be a Patreon-only stream because this is not the kind of stream that I really want on the channel. Vicky will blindfold me, and then we're going to do the taste test, okay? So we're going to get proper branded stuff, and then cheap knockoff Aldi alternatives, and we'll do a test, and we'll see if I can tell which one. We'll do a few of them. I'll speak to my Patreon supporters later on the Slack channel, and we'll come up with a list of, maybe we won't do it this weekend, but yeah, maybe at some point later in the month, we will do that. And yes, I did get your message, Brian, and I will reply to it. Thank you very much in advance. Right, we're going to take a short break now, because I need a drink, but also I'm going to tell you about the contest. So each month in this live Q&A right now, Games Law basically give me £25 to give to one of you. So every month there is a contest, and to enter the contest is really simple. Vicky's going to put a link in the chat right now. All you need to do is click on that link. It will take you to a form. The form will ask you a simple question as what is the secret word, and the secret word is birthday. And if you are a patron supporter, please let me know, because you get an extra entry into the hat if you win. So even if you're not watching this live, if you are watching this Q&A afterwards, that form will still be open. And I'm going to change the way that I do things, because what I normally do is I normally leave the form open for about a week, and then I pick a winner. But for the last 3 months, I've forgotten to do that. So I'm going to change things now. In every live Q&A, I'm going to give a contest, and the contest closes just before the next Q&A. Because that's at the point where I realise, oh, wait a minute, I haven't done the draw from the last Q&A yet. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to announce who the winner of last month's live Q&A was. So we've got that on screen. I did the draw a couple of hours ago. So the winner is, and they might be in the chat today, I haven't seen them, is Paul Plumridge. Now, Paul has been a supporter of mine since December 2018. So congratulations, Paul. I will be sending you an email along with and including Games Law. You have won £25 worth of games vouchers from Games Law. Please let us know what you decide to spend them on. And as I say, the contest for this month opens now. The secret word is birthday. Please click on the link. We only have about 80 to 90 people entering each time. So the chance of you winning is actually quite high. But yeah, it's dead easy. Click on the link, fill the form in. And as I say, if you are a patron supporter of mine, you get 2 entries for the price of 1. Right. Back to the questions. Where are we up to? It was Dan. So Dan always asks very good questions as well. Dan is saying, when I work on a rulebook for a game, do I get input into the components too? Because he's said that sometimes the components, and he specifically mentions a game board. What was the game that he mentioned? Smartphone Inc. So Smartphone Inc., there is an area of the board which summarises the gameplay with all of the steps. Vittel's games are always good like this as well. I'm one of the 3 people in the world that has seen the full board for Weather Machine. And it's fantastic, and I'm not allowed to share it. I've shown Steve, so there's 4 people in the world. Colin hasn't seen it. Colin's very jealous, but Steve has seen it. And it's fantastic because there are so many areas on the board which are graphically help explain the rules. So whilst I have input onto them, it is people like Ian and Vittel who deserve most of the credit for that. When I'm involved in a rulebook, I generally do start getting involved in other parts of the game. And there's parts of that game board for Weather Machine which I went, oh, I don't think that's a bit clear. Maybe that should be there and things like that. So I'm involved a little bit, but yeah, not really that involved. And yeah, Dan says he was caught out by the old edition of Robinson Crusoe, where a symbol that gives an extra worker for the game is the same icon as something else, and it means something different. So yeah, graphic design goes a long way in a game. You can have the best rulebook in the world, but if the graphic design of the game or the wording on the components is not clear, then it's not going to be good. Mindy says, yeah, this week marks another cycle around the sun. Happy birthday, thank you very much. Do we have holiday plans for this year now that travel isn't as restricted? So we actually did and we didn't, and both of us are still quite nervous and a little bit cautious about what's going on. So we know people in the UK that as soon as travel restrictions got lifted, went off and booked a holiday because they were desperate to get away. Me and Vicky were a bit more... yeah, cautious, nervous. I wouldn't have said nervous. We're not desperate to suddenly rush away on holiday, okay? If we'd probably prefer to wait till things get a little bit better. And if you look at what's happening in the UK with regards to the Delta variant, at the moment, cases are shooting up again. So I certainly don't feel the need to rush away on holiday. We have spoken about, because we've not had a holiday now for 7 years, 6 years, 7 years. We have spoken about where we'd like to go. We'd like to do a canal boat trip. We'd like to go away to Centre Parks for a few days or something like that. No plans to go anywhere abroad as yet. But tied in with your other question, Mindy, is which cons am I going to be attending this year? We've actually been invited to a couple of cons next year. So if we go to them, the plan is to tie the con in with a holiday. But also, we're running 3 conventions next year. That takes a lot of time and effort, and it also takes a lot of time out of Vicky's, because Vicky's in a full-time job. She gets a certain amount of holiday allowance, and she's using up a lot of that holiday allowance next year for GridCon 3, GridCon 4, and GridCon 5. So next year is going to be a little unusual. As for any cons that I'm attending this year, so at the moment, I am planning to attend UK Games Expo. If it happens, I think it will. I'm not quite sure with what's happening in the UK at the moment, but I'm currently planning to go to UK Games Expo. I am also currently planning to go to Essen, but again, I'm a little nervous about that because of what's happening at the moment. And I will be attending GridCon, which is happening in November, which is my own convention. So yeah, I better attend that one. Right, Matthew wants to know, what are my thoughts on the recent announcements for the Arkham Horror Living card game, which is a revised core set, new distribution of cycles, separate boxes for player cards and scenario cards. I absolutely agree 100% with all of the changes that they are bringing into the Arkham Horror Living card game. First of all, a core set that you can play up to 4 players, which contains 3 of every card, instead of just you needing to buy 2 core sets and then having so much wasted. Yeah, that's so much better. Cycles, I like the idea that they release a cycle once a month, but when you suddenly say, oh, I want to buy the Dunwich cycle, oh, I can only find packs 1, 2, 4 and 5, so I'll buy them, and then you spend 6 months trying to find the remaining ones. It's a pain. It's an absolute pain. And so, yeah, I fully agree with that. The downside of it, and this doesn't apply to me personally, but it is a downside, is all of the LCG model that Fantasy Flight Games have mean that some game stores have people coming in regularly once a month to pick up their packs, and that leads to other sales. With them releasing the one big box with everything in it every 6 months, while that's better for me as a player, it's not so good for the game stores. Again, it's just something I wanted to mention because it's something that I read somewhere and was like, oh yeah, that is the flip side of it. James wants to know, he says, what do I think to the statement that he heard recently? And I don't know where you heard this statement from, James. Not saying it's not true. I just keep curious to know where you heard it from. That companies are putting more effort into the production quality of their games and not so much effort into their rulebooks, in the hopes that somebody will do a good playthrough of the game online and therefore they don't need to bother. What do I think to that statement? Well, as I say, I don't know where you read that, but I've been saying that for years. And I'm not the only one who's been saying it. And I personally think it's... I can see why, right? If you decide that you're going to put a game on Kickstarter and you say this game's going to have a really good rulebook, right? The rulebook's going to be great. Nobody cares. If you want a game to do well on Kickstarter, you need bling, you need miniatures, you need things that look pretty, and people back it. And that is what sells. So as a publishing company, if you're a publisher and you've got a game that's going to Kickstarter, do you spend your time and effort on making the game look as good as possible? Because that is what's going to get you, that's what's going to make you the money. What's disappointing for me as a player is when you see games that have made 2, 3, 4 million with terrible rulebooks. Because they've paid a fortune for the art. They've paid a fortune for the miniature tooling. They've paid a fortune to people to promote the game, professional photographers, professional miniature painters. They pay an absolute fortune to all of these people to make the game look good so that it sells more. And then when the game comes out, me and you, we're trying to play the game and we can't play it. Or we end up having to look up questions online. And I'm not going to name any specific games here. But then that publisher goes online with another Kickstarter and again it makes another few million. And it's like, it bothers me as a player. It also bothers me as somebody who works professionally in the industry. And I'm not saying that because I want more work. I don't want more work. But there are other very, very good rulebook editors out there and writers out there. Get them on board. Get your rulebook properly read, properly tested, put in the time and effort that it needs. So yeah, there you go, James. What do I think about that statement? I can't help but go on a rant about it because it's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things. And I'm saying that as a player. I'm not saying that because my job is a rulebook writer and editor. I had the same thoughts on this 10 years ago. Yeah. Class wants to know, related to the rulebook question, when I start working on a rulebook for a game, what do I have to work with? And I can tell you the answer to that now. Sometimes I get sent the finished version of the rulebook. Sometimes I will get sent a PDF and they say, Paul, our game is finished, the rulebook's finished, here you go, we're giving it to you. And I get given a PDF which is nicely laid out with images, with graphics and everything else, okay? Or I could get given a rough draft in Google Docs. Or, in the case of Vital Lacerda's latest game, Weather Machine, we had a 3-hour session where he taught me as much about the game as possible, playing on Tabletopia, and I started with a blank sheet of paper. I literally started with absolutely nothing. So it really depends. It depends on the job, depends on the client, and it depends where we're going. But having worked with Vittel now for a number of years, we decided, after working on Mars together, that because the version of the On Mars rulebook that he sent me, I basically tore the whole thing to pieces, restructured it and rewrote every single sentence, that we agreed for the next one, it was possibly just easier if I just started from scratch. So that's what we did. Christopher wants to know, are there many sandbox type board games? The genre is very popular in the video game world, but he can't think of many sandbox-like tabletop games. So this is another question for the live chat. Thank you very much for your thoughts on what games would work well with Wombles. I saw a few of them in the chat. But what board game would you think classes as a sandbox? Now, I've got two for you. One of them is Zia, Legends of a Drift System, which I've played and hated. And another one called Western Legends, which I've not played. But Western Legends, I've heard mixed things about it. But one of the things that I have heard about it is it's very sandboxy. You can be a cowboy and you can go out doing this, or you can do that, or you can do that. It's not like a role-playing game, it is a board game, but you have so much choice over the different routes that you take in the game. I don't know if you would class a game like Feast for Odin as a sandbox. I don't class Feast for Odin as a sandbox, even though there's lots of different things that you can do. But yeah, so people are saying in the chat, Western Legends, Western Legends. James is saying Firefly the board game. Yes, Firefly the board game. I've played that one once, I didn't like that one either. Merchants and Marauders. I think I played Merchants and Marauders once. I think so, yeah. Sleeping Gods is a sandbox, says Brian. Okay, I've not played Sleeping Gods yet. Sleeping Gods is one of those games which everybody is talking about at the moment. I don't have a professional relationship with the publisher, but I have been that close to dropping them a message and saying, hello, you don't know me, but can I have a review copy of your game, please? Because Sleeping God looks fantastic from everything I've said, everything I've heard about it. I just don't have time for any new games at the moment. Right. What else have we got? Hexplore It. Hexplore It I've seen, not played. Nemo's War. I wouldn't say Nemo's War was a sandbox. I wouldn't have classed it as a sandbox, but I know what you mean, because you've got different things that you can do. Right, Nigel has written me a nice essay. Nigel always writes me a big long essay. I'm going to summarise this, because Nigel talks about all of the problems surrounding the recent Terraforming Mars Ares expedition, which, if you don't know, I will summarise. I'm not going to give my opinion on it, but I will summarise, is that Terraforming Mars Ares expedition was a successful Kickstarter by Stronghold Games, and the retail version of the game arrived in Target 2 to 3 months before backers got their copies. And a lot of backers were not happy about it, and there was uproar, and the internet exploded. Anyway, what's happened because of that is a lot of people have gone onto Board Game Geek and rated the game a 1, because they are nothing to do with the game, but they are so dissatisfied with the entire thing that they have rated that game a 1 on BGG. And what that's led to, and you know where this is going, it has led to fans of the game and people who have strong opinions about the fact that people shouldn't rate it a 1. They've started rating it as a 10 in order to balance that out. Now, I've actually experienced this myself. If you look me up on Board Game Geek, I am officially classed as a games designer, because Krang and the Shades of Tesla were both co-designed by myself and a friend of mine, Phil Pettifer. So I have a design credit for Shades of Tesla. Now, when the game came out, unfortunately, WizKids messed up the production. The size of the tokens was all wrong, the colours on the backs of the cards was wrong, and loads and loads of people went onto BGG and rated that game a 1. So here we are, me, the only game that I've designed, and I'm looking through all of the comments on BGG, and there's all of these 1 ratings. People use the rating system on BGG. A lot of people use it incorrectly, okay? And the question that Nigel has is, do I feel that it's possible to have a fair rating system on BGG? Now, this has been talked about many, many times before, and I remember speaking to Scott Alden, who actually created Board Game Geek, and I spoke to him about it, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care about the rating system. The rating system is in there. He doesn't care what people do with it. you know, if people want to put a 10, people want to put a 1, that's fine. Now, I can see Scott's point of view because it's impossible to control it, okay? You cannot control it, and any rating system that you allow the public to vote for, they will do what they want. What I will say is that they do have an algorithm which weeds out the 1s and the 10s. So it isn't just as bad as you might think, but yeah. I mean, people who go on and rate a game a 1 or a 10 for reasons other than the game being bad or good, I don't know. I mean, I don't do that. Do you do that? I mean, that's another good discussion point. Maybe we'll have that discussion point on the board game on my Board Game Geek Guild at some point. But as I said, there's not much you can do about that. It is open to abuse, and you can't really restrict it in any way. But it's been talked about for years. People have had so many ideas for years over it. Scott has got 2 questions. First, should, in my opinion, content creators use their platform to express personal opinions regarding social matters? That is a good question because I don't think I do that. I think I know what social matters you're referring to, and I try to make a point of making sure that all the content that I make is either about the board games, my state of health, or Jaffa Cakes. And that's it. I think they are the only 3 things that I talk about. I mean, I'll express my personal opinions on things, but you will never see me talking about politics. You'll never see me talking about anything like that, okay? It's not that I don't have my own thoughts on them, okay? There have been many times over the last 4 or 5 years where my anxiety issues have flared up and I am unable to sleep because of certain things going on in the world. So it's not that I'm a person who doesn't care and I just play my board games and I go to bed all happy, right? I do care. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world that really, really bothers me. I just don't use my platform to talk about it. So Scott is asking me, in my opinion, is it okay for content creators to express their personal opinions? Just because I don't doesn't mean I think that they shouldn't, right? If they want to, that's fine. There's a reason I don't want to do that, and if they have their reasons why they want to do it, I can see why. You know, if I was, let's say that I was extremely concerned by the armadillo population in mid-Devon, right? Let's say that that was my big thing. If I was to start in every live stream that I do banging on about how the armadillo population in mid-Devon is at risk and you all need to do this, as I say, if people want to do that, that's fine. My worry is people come to my live streams to watch board games. People follow me on social media in case I accidentally give any sneak previews of the expansion set for Lost Ruins of Arnak, right? People follow me for that. They don't follow me to hear me talking about armadillos. Well, maybe they do. So I don't generally do it. Anyway, Scott's second question is, if this is the more important question, if a content creator does use their platform to express personal opinions regarding social matters, is it then valid for a publisher to ask that content creator to separate their personal views from their content creation before the publisher will send them review copies? And this is a really good question, Scott. And the first thing I want to talk about is if the publisher has a professional relationship with the content creator. So let's take Czech Games Edition, right? I've been doing a lot of work for CGE before I even formed Gaming Rules, right? I've been working for CGE for 10 years. I have a professional relationship with them, and I have done for a very long time. Let's say I started using my personal platform to talk about social issues. Pick whatever social issue you want to talk about. Let's say I start using my personal platform to talk about Brexit, right? Or, oh dear, I said the word. Let's say I start doing that. What if CGE don't like that? What if they either have a different view or they don't like the fact that I am talking about social issues or political issues on my platform? They are well within their rights to speak to me and say, Paul, we have a professional relationship with you, and you mixing your personal thoughts with your professional side of things, yeah, they can't ask me not to do it, but they can certainly not have me anymore as a client. And that's what I would expect. Now, I don't keep my personal views to myself because I'm scared of losing clients. It's not that, but thinking about it professionally for a minute, I think a publisher is well within their rights to stop using a content creator if that content creator is posting stuff that the publisher doesn't want to see. I think. Now, don't get me wrong on this. I'm not saying people don't have freedom of speech. They do, but I have a Gaming Rules Facebook account. I also have a personal Facebook account, right? There's differences. The other thing, let's talk about if the publisher does not have a professional relationship. Let's just talk about a reviewer. Let's say Stone My Games. Stone My Games sent me a review copy of Tapestry, right? They didn't. They're not a client. They've not paid me to do any work. I have no professional relationship with them. They sent me a review copy of a game. Let's say that Jamie Stegmaier doesn't like the things that I say personally. They just stop sending review copies of games. It's as simple as that, okay? Publishers can do what they want. People can do what they want. There you go. I don't know if that's answered your question. Right. Mick wants to know, how are we doing for time? 17:38. Right. We're going to crack on with the remaining questions that I've been asked in advance. I'll get through these and then we'll go to the live questions. Mick says that he's very conscious that as a content creator, you need to cover new and upcoming games. Absolutely right. More than you'd know. But if you were trying to avoid the cult of the new, then how much time would you want to give to truly assess the quality of games? He's not looking beyond 2019, for example, but he can see arguments for both longer and shorter periods of time. So my view on this is, it's not time to truly appreciate a game. For me, it's the quantity of plays. So let's say a recent game that I got, Tekkenu, okay? Now, other content creators have already done videos of Tekkenu. And if you look back a year to when Tekkenu was being announced, and you look at all of the videos that came out for Tekkenu a year ago, and compare them to the video that I did last week of Tekkenu, right? Theirs have got 20 times as many views, because they did videos for the games that came out when the game was hot, okay? We are now a year later, and I have only just done a video for that game. So it is totally understandable that my video has a fraction of the views, a fraction of the engagement, because from a lot of people's point of view, Tekkenu has come and gone. They wanted to know about it at the time. They've watched the videos at the time. Why would they, a year later, watch me playing it? Most people who wanted the game have already bought the game. So yeah, as a content creator, if I don't cover games when they come out, I don't get the views, therefore I don't get the engagement, so the channel doesn't grow, which means publishers aren't interested in getting me to doing it. That's just the way it works. But to answer your second question of how much time would it be for me to truly assess Tekkenu? Okay, what I could do right now is I could go on a 2-week binge where I play Tekkenu every night for 2 weeks. I could play it solo 3 or 4 times. I could play it 2-player, I could play it 3-player, I could play it 4-player. 15 games of Tekkenu later, I think I would be able to assess how good that game is in my opinion. And I've done all of that within a 2-week period. So for me, it's not a case of how long since the game came out. It's more a case of how many times would I have to play it before I assess the game. Now, of course, there's no way that I can spend 2 weeks just playing Tekkenu. So what generally happens is that you play it multiple times over a period of time. But yeah, for me, it's more about the number of times that you play it. Mick also wants to know, what are my thoughts on Hallertau now I've had a bit of time to think about it? Because he knows that I'm a big fan of A Feast for Odin, so how do I rank it compared to his other games? So Hallertau, when it first came out and I covered it on the channel, I loved it. The second time I played it, I really enjoyed it. The third time I played it, I went, I'm a bit bored of this, and I haven't gone back to it. Now, I want to go back to it because I want to know whether my last opinion of the game was right or not. Because other people that I've spoken to have said, Paul, you're wrong. The game's great. You're just not seeing it. But Hallertau, for me, unlike Feast for Odin, where you've got a million different ways you can play it, and it's just such a nice game to play. In Hallertau, it all seemed to be about solving the puzzle of moving your building to the end. And that was a puzzle which you can solve. You can do that. And it's worth so many points that your main aim should be that. And then the rest of it is just the cards. And the cards are random from the deck. And you try and do them, or you... So yeah, I need to go back to it. But at the moment, my opinion of Hallertau is that it started off exciting and it started off fun, but interest has quickly fizzled out. And I need to go back to it to see. Ian is asking that I've been challenged to a fiddle contest with the devil, as he knows that I can't play the fiddle, so he asks me to choose a board game instead. And if I win the board game, it will not only release me from a life of pain and suffering, but it will grant me one board game related wish. What game would I choose? So the game that I would choose to play with the devil is Through the Ages, because I've played Through the Ages against Vlager and beat him. So if I can beat Vlager at Through the Ages, then surely I can beat anybody. So yeah, the game would be Through the Ages. What would my wish be? This is a board game related wish. That there is 100 hours in a day so that I can play all of the games in my collection that I really enjoy, and I can play all of the new titles that come out. Yeah, just basically more hours in the day, but only to play board games. Okay, so not just more hours in the day, more hours in the day to play board games. That's what my wish would be. Thomas wants to know, when do I sleep? I sleep normally between 3 minutes past 4 in the morning and about 4:15 in the morning. And I find that that's just about enough sleep to get me through the day. Rick is asking, what am I going to be doing at UK Games Expo? And Caroline wants to know, will I be there? So yes, my plan is that I am currently going to be at UK Games Expo. It's going to be a very strange year for me because for the last 10 years, I think it's about 10 years, I have worked at UK Games Expo. I have been the person who is responsible for the CGE booth, which means not just turning up and working, it means setting the booth up, doing all of the months of preparation, planning, organising a demo team, sorting out training for all of the staff, everything, right? Running a booth at a convention. And this year, I'm not. This year, CGE are not going to have a booth. I have stepped back from my responsibilities with CGE, and they're not having a booth there this year. So I am going to UK Games Expo mainly as a punter. I have offered to do some demos for patron supporters for clients that I've got. So I will be running a game of Mini Express with the UK map for some patron supporters. I'll be running a game of Magnate. I'll be running a game of Cocapelli. And I may do some other ones. But other than that, I am going to basically meet up with patron supporters and friends, play some games and talk to clients. So yeah, that's what I'm planning to do. Rick also is asking, what do I think is missing from co-op games? What is my favourite co-op game and what does it do well? I have many favourite cooperative games. Spirit Island, Gloomhaven, Arkham Horror Living Card Game, any escape room, puzzle, solving a mystery type game. Any of those games. What other cooperative games do I like? I've mentioned the big ones. Gloomhaven, Spirit Island, Arkham Horror Card Game. I mean, there's loads. Heroes of Terranoff. You know, I love cooperative games. Basically, any cooperative game I like. What do they do well? I think I'm going to answer a different question. The question I'm going to answer is, what do I think makes a good cooperative game? And for me, a good cooperative game is not one where, okay, our objective is to do X and we will all do our own thing and we're trying to achieve X. For me, a good cooperative game is where the players have to work together. And I mean work together literally in the terms of the game mechanisms. So it's all about using player powers that interact with each other, or I do this so that you can do that, and just basically operating together as a group. That's what, for me, makes a good cooperative game, rather than just you're all trying to do the same thing. I might ask that as a question on the BGG Guild. I'm going to highlight that, Rick, and I'm going to ask that as a question on the BGG Guild next week. So a quick mention about the BGG Guild for those people who haven't joined in. I have a guild. It's on Board Game Geek. It's guild number 2258. Occasionally we have various discussions on there about certain things. It would be great if you could join the guild. Vicky's going to put a link in the chat now. And if you can join the guild, make sure you subscribe. And then when we have one of these discussions on there, you can join in. Let us know. But the question is, what your favorite cooperative game and what does it do well? And I'll ask that later on. Right. Caroline wants to know which game or games end too quickly and which games go on for too long, but do I still enjoy playing them? This is a really good question because this has got me thinking. And I'm going to answer it with probably not the answer that you're looking for. So I'm going to pick a game called Praga Kaput Regni, which came out last year from Vladimir Suchy. And first of all, it doesn't end too quickly, in my opinion. Praga Kaput Regni is the perfect length for a board game. It's crunchy, it's thinky, and it's of the right length. But the reason I'm mentioning it is Praga Kaput Regni, there are like 5 or 6 different things you can do in the game. And you will only do, I'll do half of that one, a bit of that one, a little bit of that, and I'll ignore the other 3. You achieve so little in that game. If you decide to focus on one area completely, you will do that one area and ignore the other 4. So that game could go on twice as long, and you know, then you feel that you haven't accomplished very much. But I don't feel the game is too short. There's actually very few games that I think are too short. There are a few games that I think are too long, and there are some games. Hang on. There are some games which I personally do feel go on. They overstay their welcome. And when I'm playing these games, I get about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through, and I go, I'm done now. I have reached my level of enjoyment with that game. And the rest of it is just like, I wish it had ended a bit earlier. Now, I've got a few of those in mind, but I'm not going to mention them here for various reasons. But I am going to mention games which some people think go on too long, but I still enjoy playing. Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones on Saturday took us 5.5 hours. Some people, the thought of playing a 5.5 hour game is like, no, they could never ever play a 5.5 hour game. Did I feel it went on a little bit too long? Maybe a little. But did I enjoy every minute of it? Yes. Cloudspire, same thing. Cloudspire would be great if it was a 2.5 hour game. It's not. It's a 4-hour game. Does it overstay its welcome for me? No, that one doesn't. Through the Ages, the physical board game of Through the Ages is long. It's too long. Do I still enjoy it? Would I still enjoy playing Through the Ages for 4.5, 5 hours? Yeah, I would. So those games are generally thought of as long, but personally I still enjoy them. But yeah, I'm really interested to see if anybody has any ideas of games which they feel are too short. Games which end in a quicker time than they should. Right, Shannon wants to know, what rulebooks have I done and is it something that I enjoy? So thank you very much, Shannon, for your question. I can't really list all of the rulebooks that I've done here because I've been working full-time now in the industry for, lost track, 6 years? I've done a lot of rulebooks. I can tell you the rulebooks that I'm working on right now. Weather Machine by Vital Lacerda, Frostpunk by Glass Cannon Unplugged, Hybris Disordered Cosmos by Aurora Game Studios, Batman Gotham City Chronicles by Monolith. Next month I'll start work on ISS Vanguard. Burn Cycle, I'm helping out a little bit with Burn Cycle. And what was the other one? Endless Winter. Endless Winter, that should be wrapping up soon. So they are just some of the rulebooks that I'm working on at the moment. Do I enjoy it? Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a job. The people who think, oh, Paul's life, I'd love to have his life. He sits around playing games all day, right? Writing rulebooks is hard. It is harder than some of the jobs that I've done in the past. And I'll tell you what, it might even be the hardest job that I've done. And that is primarily because when I'm editing a rulebook, it's me. Now, I do get a lot of help, and a big thank you to all of the people that help me with the rulebooks. But there's more responsibility in that job than I've had in some of my other jobs. Because when you're self-employed, it's your company, it's your company's reputation that's on the line. You've got a lot more at stake. So I do enjoy it. And one of the reasons why I enjoy it is going back to what I was saying earlier on. I've been a gamer my entire life. I want good rule books. The fact that I can help a good game to have a good rule book, there is nothing more rewarding than when a heavy, complex game comes out and people buy it and people are able to play it and don't have a million questions. And I was part of that process. That makes me feel good. And therefore, whilst I might not enjoy the process, and right now, some of the projects that I'm working on, I am not enjoying because there's deadlines and there's things going wrong with them, and people don't see this. This is the behind the scenes stuff of the job. But the end result, when that game comes out and people are able to play it and read the rulebook and then go and play the game, brilliant. Mark wants to know how I organise my LCGs, my living card games, and how do I think they should be organised. An unorganised card game is an unplayed one. You're absolutely right, Mark. If you've got any kind of LCG and your cards are not organised, when you come to play it, you will struggle. Now, I've got a few LCGs and I store them in different ways, but it depends on the game. It really depends on the game. I used to use the 9-page pocket binders a lot, but for the Arkham Horror card game, I've just got mine in various boxes and they're divided by type and everything like that. Yeah. That's how I've got mine organised. But yeah, in the past, Netrunner, for example, I used to have them in the 9 pocket page sleeves. Final question before we go to the live questions. And this is from Andrew. And this is a question which somebody prompted him to ask, I think. But it's to describe my first RPG experience. Now, I started playing role-playing games in 1982 or 83. And oddly enough, although that was now 38 years ago, the very, very first moment I can remember vividly. So this is my first ever experience at a role-playing game, and this was before board games, not mentioning things like Monopoly or Cluedo or Mousetrap or anything like that. And it was me, a friend of mine, Jason, and a friend of mine, Richard. So we were all 12 or 13 years old. And the local stationery store, the guy who runs the stationery store played D&D, and therefore he was a gamer. So in the stationery store, he also stocked games. Now, we'd been into this store because we'd got into the Warlock of Firetop Mountain and we'd started playing the game book. And then somebody told us about this stationery store. Now, this is a bit of a nugget of information. That stationery store, the guy who ran that stationery store was called Kevin J. Cropper, KJC. He formed KJC Games. If you don't know what KJC Games is, if you don't know what Krasimov's World is, go and look it up on Google or Wikipedia. Because KJC Games created Krasimov's World. It's one of the first ever play-by-mail games that ever came out. And it was in Thornton Cleveleys in Lancashire, where I was born and where I lived for half of my life. Anyway, Jason bought the red box of basic D&D, okay? And he took it home, and I remember, I could tell you where his house is. He doesn't live there now because he's moved away, but I could go back to Thornton Cleveleys right now and I could go down that road and I could tell you exactly which his house was. And we went and we were sat in his front room, and it was me, Jason, Richard. There may have been one other person there as well, though I can't remember. And the basic D&D set, the red box set from basic D&D that came out in 1982 or 1983, the adventure that came with it was B2, or was it B1? I think it was B2, Into the Unknown. So we all sat around and we created our characters. And the rule book that came with it was like, you are a dwarf, you have 6 hit points, you have this, whatever, right? We all created a character. And then we all sat around. We had no idea what to do. Now, role-playing games now, every role-playing game that you buy now has at the start of it, what is a role-playing game? And it tells you what a role-playing game is. Back at the time, we had no idea. We literally didn't know what we were doing. We had this rule book. It's got dungeons in it. It's got dragons in it. We like fantasy. We don't know what we're doing whatsoever. And we basically went, well, one of us has got to be the GM. So you can be the GM, right? Well, what do I do? Well, he didn't know what to do. So we just sat around and we talked to each other and we didn't know what we were doing. And I will never forget this because I worked it out. Okay, it was me that worked it out. And what I did is it suddenly dawned on me. And I went, this is like Walker Firetop Mountain. And they went, yeah. And I went, but instead of going left or right, you actually have a choice to do whatever you want. So a fighting fantasy adventure book, you have limited choices of where you go. I said, it's just like that, but instead of me giving you a number of choices, I give you, what do you want to do? And then it's completely up to you. And then suddenly it clicked and we worked out how to play a role-playing game ourselves. And then what's really, really interesting about, is it whether it was B1 or B2, in Journey into the Unknown or whatever it was called, it's a really funny scenario because it is possibly the worst scenario to put with a game for a starter set. Because what it is a map of a set of caves, and each cave has a number, and when you read that number in the book, it gives you a description of the cave, and that's it. There is literally no adventure. There is nothing in there. There's nothing in any of the rooms. As a GM, you are supposed to populate the rooms yourself. So literally, we played through this adventure and we walked into the first cave and it was like, oh, the sound of dripping water. Oh, and it's very murky and right, okay, yeah. Well, what can we see? Well, you light your torch and you can see an exit over there and an exit over there. Right, we'll go through that exit. Right, next room. Okay, there's a stagnant pool of water on the ground, right? And the spider webs in the corner, right? Next room. And it was literally just that. And we spent about half an hour playing this game with the GM, just reading the description of each cave. Eventually we got bored and walked out. Anyway, that was my first ever experience sat in Jason's front room on a Saturday afternoon, sometime 1982, 1983. I have years worth of role-playing game stories to tell you, if you want to know them. Right. That is the end of all of the questions that I got asked in advance. So thank you very much to everybody who's asked me questions in advance. Before we move on, I'm just going to mention the contest again. So if you are watching this video, either live or watching it afterwards, you can enter the contest. It will run from now until the next live Q&A. And all you need to do is you need to click on the link, which Vicky's going to put in the chat now. Answer the secret word, which is birthday, because it's my birthday this Saturday. And let me know if you're a patron supporter. Everybody gets one entry into the contest, and if you are a patron supporter, you get 2 entries. And you can win £25 worth of vouchers. So thank you very much to Games Law for giving those £25 worth of games vouchers away, and good luck to everybody for entering. Right, I'm now going to move on to all of the live questions that I have been asked. I will get through as many of these as I can, but we want to be wrapping this up in about 30 to 40 minutes time. How hungry are you? Okay, we're okay. So off we go then. Graham, does Vicky enjoy this part of the job? Yes. She likes seeing the questions. She can't imagine how I used to do it myself. So before Vicky used to help me, which was, you've been doing it about 6 months now. So before Vicky helped me, I used to do these Q&As on my own. And it was nightmare. It was really stressful and it was a lot of work. So yeah, big thank you to Vicky for helping me, because it just makes these a lot easier to do. Monica has got another question. How far have you gone for a game, either in a monetary way or travelling to a specific place to get it? I don't think... Terra Mystica? What about Terra Mystica? I went to London to get Terra Mystica. I don't think I ever went to London to play to... Oh! Your memory's better than mine. So when Terra Mystica came out, I wanted it desperately, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And then I managed to find a copy. Oh, who was it? It's the guy who doesn't do it anymore. There's a guy in London, and I'm friends with him, and I think he's called Paul. Who am I thinking of? It's a games retailer in London called Paul. He doesn't do it anymore. I think he sold it to Angus, and I can't remember the name of the retailer, but he had a copy of Terra Mystica, and we were going to London to visit 2 of Vicky's friends, and basically while we were there visiting the friends in London, I popped out one afternoon I think, to his house, or I met him on a street somewhere in Greenwich, whatever, and picked up Terra Mystica. So yeah, that's what I did. Just Board Game Guru. That's it, Peter. Thank you very much. Yeah, Paul from Board Game Guru. So that's the longest distance that I've gone to actually pick up a game. That was to London. Well remembered. How long ago was that? I mean, that was when Terra Mystica came out. So next question. This is from Brian. Which crowdfunding projects are you most looking forward to in the second half of 2021? I'll be honest with you, Brian. I have almost zero idea of what is coming out later this year, other than the project which I'm involved in, which is Voidfall. Now, if I wasn't professionally involved in Voidfall would be a game which I am super looking forward to. David Turtsey, Nigel Buckle, Mind Clash Games. David has told me a bit about this game already. Voidfall, on the surface, looks like it is going to be an absolutely amazing game. So if I wasn't professionally involved in it, that's the one that I would be really looking forward to. I'm still really looking forward to it because David Turtsey and Nigel Buckle are coming here to Gaming Rules HQ in September to film some videos for Voidfall ready for the Kickstarter campaign. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it from that respect. As for what other Kickstarter projects are coming out later this year, I literally don't know of any because I'm not. I only know about the ones which I'm involved in. Yeah, I mean, the next Vital Lacerda game, the On Mars cooperative version, that goes live in a couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to that one as well. But again, I'm kind of involved in that one. Pig Bobman says, what makes you decide which games to get rid of when thinning out the collection? Very different. So I'll be honest with you. I have a tertiary storage system, or even maybe 4. So I have the games room, right? The games room contains all of the games. I also have some games in the studio. When I need more space, because new games have arrived and I don't have space to store them, they go up into the attic, stroke loft, whichever one you want to call it. Now, at the point a game goes into the attic, that's kind of me saying, I'm not going to play this game again, but I'm not brave enough to get rid of it yet. Okay? And then there's also the garage. So sometimes games will go in the... Now, we need to sort out the games in the garage. There doesn't need to be any games in the garage. But I basically have a system where things go. Now, once the game has been in the secondary or tertiary storage system for about a year and a half, I will look at it and I will say, I'll tell you what, I said I wasn't going to play this again. I'm probably not going to play it again. And at that point, if you want to know what I do with my old games, I put them into a charity raffle. I don't sell them. I basically run a charity raffle at GridCon, my own convention, and I put them into a charity raffle and we try and raise money for charity. So that's where my games go. What makes me decide to get rid of it? It's just when I look at them and I go, I'm not going to play this game anymore because it's been replaced by a better version of the game, or I've got a new edition of it, or something like that. Yeah. Jill says lasagna or spaghetti. Lasagna, definitely. I mean, I love food, Italian food, lasagna, spaghetti, pasta, everything like that. But spaghetti just gets messy, gets bits all over my nice clean white shirts. So yeah, lasagna definitely. Monica says, how do I feel about all of the flack in the Kickstarter campaign comments when games are delayed? People are people. So there's 2 types of flack and comments that people get. If a game is delayed because of situations outside of their control, then the flack is unjustified. If the game is delayed because the publisher has messed up, like for various reasons, but it is the publisher's fault that the game is delayed, then they deserve some of their flack. You know, if I do something wrong in life, I deserve to be punished, right? And I don't mean punished like 20 lashings, but one of my fundamental things about life is that if you do something good, you should get good things back. And if you do something bad or you do something wrong, then you shouldn't get good things. And if I do something wrong, I deserve the criticism. That's just, you know, and then hopefully I won't do it wrong again. And hopefully I'll do it better. So yeah, I think it's unfair. Now, saying that, the internet and people on the internet sat behind a screen typing away. People are nasty, and that, yeah. Even when somebody's giving flack, I think. But to be honest, comments on a Kickstarter page, and comments on Board Game Geek, and comments on any form of social media, it's one reason why I've stepped back from various aspects of social media. Is you see the comments on there, the people just being nasty to each other. And I'm not talking trolls. I'm talking people who are respected, other content creators, influencers, people in the industry, whatever. And the stuff that I see from them against each other, it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. And I'm not just saying the people who are openly criticizing and belittling me, because, you know, they exist, but it's just horrible to see it. And that's people who people know about. So yeah, I don't like it, but I also feel that if a publisher makes mistakes and a publisher has delays because of mistakes they've made, yeah. What do I think about This War of Mine? Any plans for a live walkthrough? So, I don't own a copy of This War of Mine. I do not have a copy of the game. I haven't asked the publisher for a copy of the game. What do I think about it? So I've never played the physical board game. And until about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I would not want to play the board game. I've heard that the rulebook isn't very good. And that means that there's going to be a barrier to entry to me learning the game. And why would I voluntarily put myself through more work in having to decipher a rulebook and read FAQ and watch videos into play a game when I have 200 other games with perfectly good rulebooks? I don't know. But I last year I actually did a playthrough series of the computer game. So if you're interested in seeing me play through This War of Mine, the computer game, I have done a series of videos on that on channel. And that has made me look at the board game again. And I possibly would play it if I got the chance through it. So what do I think about the game? I have huge respect for the game itself, because we play so many games that are set in a fantasy world or are about building a castle in Europe in the medieval period or whatever, right? And all of these games are great, and these games are an escape from reality, and they're good fun to play. This War of Mine tackled a real situation and did it in a very good way. It was set in a very, very difficult period, and the game itself captures the feel of that period. A lot of people, including me, had to make... When I was playing the computer game, I was given choices in that game that made me feel uncomfortable as a player. And playing the physical board game, you are going to have those same choices. Okay? Do you go next door to the old bloke next door who's barely alive and steal his food because you're about to starve to death? If you do, he dies. If you don't, you die. Make the decision. I personally don't want those kind of decisions in my life, okay? And you're playing a game for fun. You're playing a game as a break from reality. You're playing a game, but I'm making it sound like it's bad and I wouldn't do it. I'm glad that they did it, because that game was set, you know, around something that really happened. And I'm kind of glad that there are games out there like that which make you think and put you in that place, even though it made me really uncomfortable. So yeah, I have a lot of respect for the game as to what it did. Jilly's asking, what overlong beige heavyweight Euro would be better as a card game? Oh, an overly long beige heavyweight Euro game. I'm going to say Arkwright, even though I've never played Arkwright. Arkwright is the beigest of the beige. It's heavy, it's a Euro, and I believe, some people will disagree, that it is overly long. So I'm going to say Arkwright. Surprise, surprise, Arkwright has had a card game. Paul Snuggs wants to know, Aeon's End, War Eternal or New Age? I don't know. So although I do have Aeon's End, War Eternal, it's the first Aeon's End game that I've got, I don't think I've ever played it. I've only ever played Aeon's End Legacy or Aeon's End with the base set. I've never actually played any of War Eternal. So yeah, I don't have New Age, so I can't answer you on that. I don't know which one. Anthony is asking, what are my favourite 3 solo games with an Ultima and 3 without? I'm not going to be able to answer that question right now, because that's going to require me to think a lot. But I can say, I mean, I'm glad you've given me the distinction, because I can see there are some games with an Ultima and there are some games without. And I know a good friend of mine and solo games designer David Digby thinks that the solo games where you are not playing against an opponent, where you literally just play and you get as many points as you can, are pointless and are not really solo games. And I personally love those games. If you give me a solo game like Feast for Odin, where you say, look, Paul, just play Feast for Odin and see how many points you get, I love it. I think it's great. So Feast for Odin, Underwater Cities, Praga Kaput Regni, anything like that, any solo game like that without an Ultima, I really like. Now, there are some with Ultimas that I do like, but what I don't like is a complex Ultima, which I have to go, And I remember doing a solo playthrough of Clans of Caledonia with a complex Ultima, and I never want to do that again. Never, ever want to do that again. That was one of my worst gaming experiences from the last 12 months, just because the Ultima was very clever. And by very clever, I had to melt my brain into going, okay, so it'll do that, but if it's a Tuesday, it's going to do this, unless it's raining, in which case it will do that, and then it will do this, and then you roll the dice and you look up on this table and then it'll do that. And I'm like, I don't want that in a game. I don't want that in games. So it is difficult for me to pick my favourite games at the moment solo, because I'm enjoying so many of them. I've been asked that question quite a few times, and I always skirt away from answering it, because the last few solo games that I've played, I've really enjoyed. Is that okay? That's Thor wailing in the background. What is my take on Phil Eklund's games like High Frontier, BIOS, and Pact Renaissance? So, Vincent, thank you very much for the question. Has somebody put you up to that? Because I have thoughts on Phil Eklund as a person, and I have thoughts on his games. And I've spoken about this before, and I'm going to try and give you a short answer. I don't like Phil Eklund's games. I do not like Phil Eklund's games for a few reasons. First of all, his rulebooks are possibly some of the worst rulebooks in the industry. And I'm saying that not as criticism, I am saying that as a gamer, and I'm not saying that as, oh, Paul's a rulebook editor, it's wrong for him to criticize other rulebooks. I'm saying that as a gamer, the rulebooks, generally speaking, for Phil Eklund games, are some of the worst rulebooks that I have ever seen in any game that I have ever played. That's a problem for me. That is a problem for me, that no effort seems to be made to make those rulebooks any better. And as I mentioned earlier on, some publishers are actually learning, and some publishers are starting to get the message that they need to work harder on their rulebooks. And Phil Eklund's games don't seem to do that. I might be wrong, but certainly that's the experience I've had. As far as the games, I've played 3 of them, and I've hated pretty much every single one. I don't like the games. I find them more simulations than games. I find them very random. I find them overly long, overly complex. But I have a huge amount of respect for the amount of time and effort that must have gone in to designing a game. I mean, you look at High Frontier. It's like rocket science, and he must have researched that topic so much to be able to build a game which simulates all of that in a very, very realistic way. So I have huge respect for the amount of time and effort that's gone into it, but I have no interest in playing those kind of games at all. Gabriel wants to know, Through the Ages is a game that I still play. What about the expansion? Through the Ages is a game which I still play. Now, I only play it now on the app, but it is one of the best games ever designed. I still love playing it. The app is arguably the best app for any board game ever, and I still play it on the app. I still play it multiplayer with other people, and I still play it solo on the app. So yeah, and I do play with the expansion. Through the Ages is a game that I still play. Marcelo wants to know, am I designing something of my own volition? Do I have that special game project that I want to see you play? Absolutely. Now, I'm not actively working on it because I currently don't have any time. Unfortunately, the rulebook projects that I have taken on in the last 6 to 9 months have ended up being a lot more work than was originally planned for. So unfortunately, my free time is very, very little at the moment. But Gloomhaven, the card game, I have ideas. I already have Isaac's Blessing, and I have ideas for Gloomhaven, the card game. And all it needs is for me to start taking some time out of my schedule to actually get something on paper. I have some ideas. If I really wanted to, then in about 3 or 4 days, if I just said, right, I'm going to do it, I could mock up a very rough version of the idea that I've got for the game just to see if it works. But yeah, I tell you what, Gloomhaven, the card game, I'll give you the basic, the sales pitch now. It captures the feel of Gloomhaven, but without a board, and it plays in about half the time, and is less complex. That's my idea behind Gloomhaven, the card game. I mean, to be honest, whenever any game comes out, whenever it has a card game, it's usually less complex, plays in less time, and captures the same feel of it. That's the whole idea of a card game, right? So, yeah, Gloomhaven, the card game. I mean, I've got a few others in my mind. You know, I'd love to do a Factorio board game, and I've got a couple of other ones skirting around in my head, but I'm not really a games designer. I mean, technically I am, but I'm not. So yeah, it's just about time, really. Monica wants to know, are there any video games from older systems that you would like to see redone for new systems like Steam? So we're talking computer games here, I think. If you're talking video games from bygone eras that I would like to see redone for new systems. So I've been playing computer games since the 80s. There are a number of old computer games which I thought were fantastic, which I would love to see updated versions of. Tell me in the chat if you have ever heard of this game. This is a game that came out in the 80s for the Amiga, and it was called Deuteros. Deuteros. Absolutely loved it, right? Amazing, amazing game. Now, about a year ago, I managed to find the files for it, and I got an Amiga emulator for my computer, and I loaded it up and tried to play it. And unfortunately, it didn't play properly because it kept crashing. But what a brilliant, brilliant game that was. And there's a few as well. I remember playing the old Commandos game, and that was brilliant as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of very old computer games which I think could be redone. Now, there's a lot of computer games which I liked back in the day, like Red Alert, Command and Conquer, Myst, and things like that. Those games have been updated, and we have newer versions of those games. But things like Deuteros and Commandos, I don't know whether we've got new versions of those. So Jonathan is saying it was a follow-up to Millennium. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Right. Liberation Games Design wants to know, which themes do I want to see another game on? Anything. I mean, we have the theme discussion regularly. Normally people ask me, which theme would I like to see in a board game that hasn't been made into a board game? My answer is always the same, the Dresden Files, which kind of has, but I want to see more Dresden Files board games. But I like a lot of different themes. So it isn't that there is a theme out there that I want to see more of. I'm pretty much happy with anything. Yeah, I can't think of any specific theme that I'd want to see more of, just because I'm really happy with the themes that come out in games. Now, that, you know, we play a lot of games where the theme is irrelevant. I mean, if we look at Praga Kaput Regni, for example, that is another dry, boring Euro that could be about anything. I play that game for the mechanisms rather than theme. Then we take a look at something like Perseverance, which is another game that's coming out from Mind Clash Games, which I think is going to be coming out next year. Now, Perseverance, mechanically, is a very good game. But the theme of the game, about the fact that it's this, you know, luxury ocean liner which has crashed on this island, which is a previously unexplored island, and there's dinosaurs on it and things like that. That's great. You know, I like that. But as I always say, it doesn't matter how good the theme is. If you gave me Factorio, the board game, and mechanically it was rubbish, you know, if it was a push your luck take that game with blind bidding and a traitor mechanic, I wouldn't play it, even though the theme is great. So for me, a good theme makes me enjoy a game more, but I play a game for the mechanisms, not for the theme. Vincent, what do I think of games with a strong cultural or scientific resonance, like Sierra Madre games and Phil Eklund's rulebooks? We've kind of mentioned that earlier on. I've mentioned Phil Eklund's rulebooks, and I've mentioned the fact that I have a huge amount of respect for the amount of time and effort that goes into researching the subject. But as I say, you know, if somebody like a games designer who designs games that I like was to pick a particular aspect of history and do a lot of research to make a game that's historically accurate, great, I'd love that, but not Phil Eklund. Right. Monica says, how do I rank those 3 things that I talk about? Oh, that's when I talk about games, Jaffa Cakes, and my health situation. How do I rank those 3 things that I talk about? Well, games. Games mainly. The other 2 are thrown in just as a little bit of a joke generally. Vincent, another question from Vincent. What are the pitfalls for those that are both designer and publisher, according to me? Oh, very good question. And again, we could do a whole subject of that. So, as a designer, one of the pitfalls that I think you can fall into, and again, I feel a bit weird saying this because I don't really class myself as a designer, but I've worked with so many designers and I have seen them fall into the pitfalls, is you have to listen to your developers. Okay? If you think you've done something great and all of your developers are going, this isn't really working, right? Then you have to listen to them. And I have worked with designers over the last few years who get a bit too fixated on it. And you say to them, look, the game's too long. The game literally goes on twice as long as it should. Everybody's bored after an hour and a half. We all want it to be over. An hour and a half and we all feel, great game. Yes, this is good. What? We're only halfway through? Right? And a designer needs to listen. Needs to listen to the developers, needs to listen to the play testers, needs to listen to everybody, needs to be open to other ideas, because designers, on the whole, have great ideas, but most designers need their ideas shaping and developing. And there are certain designers I know that need very little development work, and there are other designers I know that have a really good idea, but the way that they've executed it has been awful. And I've said this before. When you buy a game in the shops and there is a person's name on that box, you do not know how much involvement that person had in that game. And I can tell you from experience that that name that's on the front of that box can have anywhere from 30% to 90% of that game. Literally, you might buy a game and it might have his designer's name on the box, and they might have come up with the idea, and then the developers spent 2 years working on it, but that original person's name will still be on the box because it's their game. And I've worked on projects like that. I obviously can't tell you which projects they are because that wouldn't be fair on the designer, but I always find it interesting when a project that I've been involved in like that, and you see people on BGG afterwards saying, oh, such and such a thing, why didn't the designer think about this? And I'm there going, the designer had nothing to do with this game for the last 18 months. They literally weren't involved in it whatsoever. So yeah, so that's a designer that's a pitfall that a designer can fall into. A pitfall that a publisher can fall into is underestimating the amount of work that is required on a game to get it published correctly. And I don't just mean rulebook, but I mean so many people think, oh, I've got an idea for a game, I'm going to go on Kickstarter. And they put the game on Kickstarter and it funds, and then they go, oh, wait a minute, we've got to do this and we've got to do that, and oh, we've got to do this. Oh, and we promised people an extra expansion set, and oh, we've now got to go and design an expansion set. Games take a long time to do, and a long time to do correctly, and you need to have multiple pair of eyes on any project that you're working on to make sure it's as good as you can be. And I have seen, it's blatantly obvious to me, where publishers have cut corners, rushed things, stuck to deadlines, not put the money in where it's needed, and what you end up with is not a good project, not a good product at the end of the day. Next question from Kumabank. If I have the video equipment I use to record videos I've been making. So there is a thread on my guild. If you go to my guild on BGG, guild number 2258, on there I actually have a thread which is all of the equipment that I've got. From the computer to the microphones to the lighting to the overhead camera, it's all on there. So all of the equipment is on there. But don't rush out and just buy what I've got, because to be honest, my overhead camera, which I'm pointing to up there, it's actually there, the autofocus is too slow. I have seen other people who do playthroughs, live playthroughs like me, and they hold a card up to the camera and it focuses straight away. Mine doesn't. Mine takes about 2 seconds to autofocus, so I can't use it for that. So yeah, don't buy the camera that I'm using just because I'm using it. Right. We've got a few questions left. So I will say at this point, no more questions. If you do have any more questions for me, please save them till the next Q&A, which will be at the end of July. I don't know exactly when, because UK Games Expo might get in the way. But yeah, no more questions for now, and I'm just going to answer all of the ones that I've been asked so far. So, question from Eves. Why do games designers continue to make bad rulebooks without an index? Well, going back to what I was saying earlier on, this is really interesting, because you've said, why do games designers continue to make bad rulebooks? Normally, games designers don't have much to do with the rulebook. Now, there are some exceptions, Vittel, for example, but games designers sometimes have no involvement with the rulebooks whatsoever. So I'll rephrase that. Why do publishers continue to make bad rulebooks without indexes? I have seen some very, very, very good rulebooks without an index. So a rulebook isn't bad just because it doesn't have an index. An index sometimes helps. In fact, most of the time it does help. But I've seen really good rulebooks that don't have indexes. Question from Julian. Thank you, Julian, for popping in. Am I willing to make a video for the best game of 2022? No, not interested. I'm only now doing games that have a rating of 4 or less on BGG. So I'll tell you what, Julian, if you create 1,000 BGG accounts and go in and rate your own game a 1 on BGG, that'll get the rating low, and then I'll do a video on it. How's that? Does that sound like a deal? No, seriously? Yeah, of course I'm interested. CompuCube says, what's my favourite short thinky game? Oh, I'm going to need time to think about this. I've been an hour and a half. I'm exhausted. My favourite short thinky game and my favourite long non. I'll tell you what, this is a question for the guild. Okay, I'm not going to answer that now. I'm going to highlight it in red. There is going to be a question on my BGG guild coming in the next few days. What is your favourite short thinky game? And what is your favourite long non-thinky game? It's interesting because I don't know, if you're asking for my favourite long non-thinky game, would I play a game that's long if I didn't have to think about it? I don't know if I would. Because for me, if it's going to be a long game, I want that return on investment. I wouldn't play a short, simple game for 4 hours. Well, it wouldn't be a short. I wouldn't play a simple game for 4 hours. So for me, if I'm going to play a game for 4 hours, by definition, it probably is a thinky game. So yes, that question is coming to the guild later on. Right, Monica says, if I could make any dinner in Jaffa Cake, what dinner would it be? Well, a cake. It would just be a Jaffa Cake. No, to be honest, I don't think, I'm going to say something now and then contradict myself, just so you know. I don't think a Jaffa Cake would go with anything. That mixing it in with anything else would be a bit weird. And I'm now going to contradict myself. Every morning I have porridge. In that porridge every morning is porridge, chia seeds, a teaspoon of honey, mixed nuts, and a Jaffa Cake. And I did it as a joke. Okay? The first time I put a Jaffa Cake in my porridge, oh, and a banana, half a banana as well. That's my breakfast every morning. So the first time I put a Jaffa cake in my porridge, I crunch it up, I split it up into bits and I mix it in. I did it as a joke. And now I have it every day because that little bit of chocolate and that little bit of orange just gives the whole thing a really nice taste. So yeah, I have a Jaffa cake every morning in my porridge. Adam is here. Adam's got some questions. As things currently stand, is GridCon 2 all still looking good and going ahead? GridCon 2 is currently all good and still going ahead. This is my own convention that I run at the end of November every year. We are sold out. We did sell the tickets for it 2 years ago. It is a delayed convention, 2 years late, but better late than never, and it is currently sold out. We do have a waiting list for patron supporters for the spare tickets that we're going to have because some people have had to cancel. But yeah, we're still going ahead. Next question is for Vicky. The next Lego project. Yeah, that is a very good question. So Vicky has recently finished making the Millennium Falcon. So for Christmas, I got her the Millennium, the big, like whatever edition was called. What's it called? Ultimate something. Anyway, the big one, right? And last weekend, Vicky finished it. And Adam is asking, what is the next Lego project after that one? And it's a good point because any Lego project that I've now spoiled everything because I've ruined Lego for Vicky because every Lego project that she does from now on is not going to be as good as the Millennium Falcon. I think what I might do is take it apart while she's not looking and throw away the instruction book. And then I will go and find a new house to live in. Right, Monica is asking, if I'm sent to one of those ice hotels in Scandinavia and I need games for the evening, which games would I choose? Oh, an ice hotel in Scandinavia. So if I was... Right, now are you saying which game would I play because I'm in an ice hotel? Or are you just saying which game would I choose to play? I don't know. What games have I mean, it would have to be Frostpunk. It would have to be Frostpunk or Ice Cool. One of those two games. It would have to be something thematic. Yeah, so probably something like that. I mean, I know those ice hotels exist because they were in James Bond. I just don't know how they work. How do you get a hotel made of ice? How is it warm? Maybe it's not warm. Yeah, Jonathan makes a good point. Anything by Chip Theory Games because they're waterproof. Next question from Monica. Have I ever connected a game to a song or a movie stroke series? If so, do I have any examples? Connected a game to a song or a movie stroke series? I don't think I have. I mean, do I have any games based on movies? I mean, not counting Lord of the Rings, where it was a genre and the film is just one aspect of that genre. Battlestar Galactica, that was based on a TV series. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by connected a game to a song or a movie series. I'm not sure. Stevie says, if he visits someday, can he be in a Q&A? Absolutely. In fact, the Q&A from either last month or the month before almost had a special guest because Dan was here. And I moved the Q&A because Dan was here playing games. But one of the options that I had was that Dan actually joined me for a Q&A. Now, we decided against that at the time because we felt it would be a little weird. Because although Dan does play games, Dan probably would not be able to answer most of the questions that came up. And therefore, it would be me doing the Q&A with Dan sat next to me. And if I'd love the idea of a guest on a Q&A. You know, I'd love it if Vicky did the Q&As with me, but that's not going to happen. So yeah, maybe I'll experiment. Maybe as an experiment, 1 month, I will get one of my local friends who knows a bit about games to join me for the Q&A. We'll do a joint Q&A, and then I'll see what people think. And if people say, no, Paul, it was a bit weird, we prefer just you on your own. But I think Vicky made another good point, is that, and this is a question for you as viewers, if there was somebody else here with me on a Q&A, would that be weird for you? Because are you here asking me questions and do you want my answers? And surely a Q&A with another person would take twice as long because we'd end up discussing things and every question would take 10 minutes to answer and the Q&A would be 4 hours long. But yeah, I'm curious if that's something that you would like to see. a Q&A with somebody else here, then let me know. Adam is asking, if I had time to join an RPG group, what would be my system of choice and what setting I would go for? Yeah, if I had time to join an RPG group, it would be difficult for me to pick a setting because there are a number of them which I'd like. First of all, I would like to play D&D again. And I would try D&D 5th edition, which I've not played, but I'd heard good things about. I'd love to play Shadowrun. Shadowrun would probably be my number one. And I know John Madani has promised me, you may not have promised me, but I'm now saying live on camera that you promised me this, therefore it becomes fact, that he's going to run a game of Shadowrun which I can play in. Because Shadowrun is an amazing setting. I love the mix of slightly futuristic Matrix-esque, but also mixed with fantasy, trolls and elves and magic. Love that. Absolutely love it. It's combining the best things together. So Shadowrun would definitely be a system which I'd like to play. There's probably other ones as well. I mean, Lord of the Rings, I mean, some kind of fantasy role-playing game set in the Lord of the Rings universe. Star Wars role-playing game, if done correctly, would be fantastic. So, yeah. Last two questions. Another one's from Monica. Do I feel some games get so overcrowded with expansions that it just becomes too much? Yes, absolutely. And I'm working on some games like that now that were very, very successful Kickstarters. And I've done the core rulebook, and then I get told, right, Paul, we now need you to do the rulebooks for the 5 expansions. And I'm like, but this is a medium weight euro. And it's a good medium weight euro. And if you add in an expansion, it can mix it up a bit. If you add in another expansion, it can mix it up a bit more. But if you add in 5 expansions, I think it's going to be mind-blowing. Now, I've got mixed feelings about this because I know people that play Terraforming Mars with all of the expansions, and they love it. They absolutely love it with everything mixed in. I've played Terraforming Mars now about 10 times. If you played Terraforming Mars with me and mixed all of the expansions in, I would not enjoy it. And Terraforming Mars is one of my favourite games. And I wouldn't enjoy it just because there's too much going on. So there is a time and a place for mixing in all of the expansions. And this is why I say I've got mixed thoughts on it. First of all, if you're playing a game with new players, you should play the base game. Don't put in expansions. The people who put in expansions because they like them and they're good at the game, no. Right? Now, the exception is Terraforming Mars with Prelude. Yeah, because it's kind of necessary. So you should always play, generally speaking, the base game first. But, and this is so mixed thoughts, if you find a group of people that love a game so much and have played it so often that they then start playing with all of the expansions and it becomes a better game because they're playing with everything, brilliant. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But as somebody who generally doesn't play games 40, 50 times, you start mixing in all of those expansions and it just gets too much for me. So yeah. Final question for today before we wrap things up and I go downstairs for gammon, steaks, mac and cheese and chips. Not chips, but I want chips. Here's a question from Adam about my Gloomhaven, the card game. Would it be an LCG? It would not be an LCG. Yeah, there you go. Very simple. It wouldn't be an LCG. It would be a game that had expansion sets. But I mean, obviously, if Gloomhaven, the card game, ever gets made, it would be up to Isaac as to how it was published. But my personal thoughts are that it won't be a big game with 3 years of content. It would be here's the introductory game, here's how this works, here's some characters, and then there would be expansion sets with other scenarios, other stories, other campaigns, other characters, and everything else. That's the idea. Right, we are done. I have had a brilliant time. I have loved this. This has been really good. Thank you very much to everybody for joining in live, and hello to everybody who is watching afterwards. Couple of shout-outs before we finish. I say couple, there's going to be 3. First of all, big thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. So for those people watching this that are Patreon supporters of mine, it is your support that makes not only this video possible, but most of the other videos on my channel possible. So thank you very much for making these happen. If you are not a Patreon supporter of mine, please consider supporting me on Patreon because literally the Patreon support is what makes these videos possible. And if you watch the videos that I create and you are in a position to be able to support me, fantastic. The link is in the bottom right, patreon.com/gaming rules. It's nearing the end of the month. In fact, when is the end of the month? It's today. Right. I'm doing a giveaway this month. One of my Patreon supporters is going to win my old copy of Anachrony with the broken token insert and the miniatures expansion. Okay? So if you're interested in that and you want to support me on Patreon, now is your chance. Today is the last day. Unlike the giveaway that I'm running at the moment, where you have to click on the form and enter it to win the £25 of the games vouchers, this isn't that. This is something different. One of my Patreon supporters will win my old copy of Anachrony. You don't need to enter it. So if you're a Patreon supporter and you're watching this video, don't worry, you don't need to do anything. You automatically get entered into the contest. But yeah, if you are able to support me on Patreon, please do so, because as I say, I do rely on the Patreon funding to keep producing content. The second thing I want to mention is the £25 giveaway. So again, thank you very much to Games Law for sponsoring this. Vicky can't put this in the chat because Vicky has a cat. So I am just going to put the link in the chat right now. This is the contest to win £25 worth of games vouchers. And it is going in, if I can find it, there. Right. There you go. There is the link in the chat. Click on that. Takes you to the form. The secret word is birthday, because it's my birthday on a Saturday. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you get an extra free entry into that contest. So that's for the £25 giveaway contest. And the third thing I wanted to mention was, I've forgotten. There were three things. What did I want to talk about? Thanks very much to the patrons. Thanks to Paul for the £25 games voucher. Please like the video. Obviously, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed to it. But don't just like the video. Don't just subscribe to the channel. Click that little notification bell. Because if you don't click the little notification bell, you won't find out about any other videos. Jill wants to see Thor. He's not going to like this at all. He's really not going to like this. Come on, you. Right, so this is Thor. This is one of our cats. There you go, Thor. Look at that. You're on camera. He's cute, isn't he? The light is too bright. I've just noticed it is a bit bright. Yeah, there you go. Right. Other content coming to my channel. Mage Knight, Friday. This Friday, I will be doing a live 2-player tutorial and playthrough of Mage Knight using the new playmats from Powerplant Games. So that's happening this Friday. If you are interested in watching that, it is me teaching Mage Knight to a friend and showing off the new playmats. And then, yeah, it's my birthday on Saturday. So happy birthday, me, 27 years old. What are you laughing about? Thor's eating the bag. Oh, he's so cute. He goes out all day. We don't see him all day. And then he comes in at this time and he just starts chewing and eating things. Don't you? Right, okay. We're going to wrap things up. I'm sure there was something else I was going to say. I will remember as soon as we stop, as soon as this video goes off, I will remember what it was. Yeah, I will see you all later on. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next month for another live Q&A, but I will see you in another live chat for another video coming soon. Take care. I'll see you soon.
Gaming Rules is proudly sponsored by Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Visit GameToppers